Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. The Life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, Part 6. The Lesson of Pride at the Valley of Hunayn. Islam flourished in Mecca and the Muslims became stronger and stronger. But south of Mecca lived a tribe of warriors called Hawazin, who had not become Muslim. They made an agreement with another tribe from Taif to fight the Muslims and destroy them before they could spread their religion throughout Arabia. They were known for their courage, soon won the support of other tribes living around Taif area, especially when such tribes were told, "Look what has happened. If Quraysh, the largest tribe of all, have fallen to Muhammad, it is only a matter of time before the same will happen to the rest of us. We should strike now before the Muslims are established in Mecca and have the support of Quraysh." The chief of one of these tribes, a fearless warrior called Malik, was chosen as the leader. He put forward a plan. You should all go out to battle, accompanied by your families, your tents and everything you have, all your belongings, and none of you will dare give up the fight. Everyone agreed with Malik except an old blind man called Yathrib. He had been a great warrior in his day and, because of his experience and valuable advice, still accompanied the men into battle. "I don't like Malik's plan," he insisted. "If a man is so cowardly as to leave a battle, then he will leave his family as well. The women and children will be a great worry to us, and if we are defeated, all our wealth will fall into the enemy hands." But Malik ignored this advice and stuck to his original plan. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, heard what the enemy tribes were planning, he found himself forced to fight and ordered his army towards Taif. He had 12,000 men and the enemy only 4,000. The Muslims were proud of their strength, and as they looked around at their number, said to themselves, "We will never be defeated." On hearing this, the Prophet, peace be upon him, knew that the Muslims had become too proud and because of this would not succeed. He warned them, "Look to Allah and not to your own strength." The time for battle came. The Muslim army advanced along the Hunayn path, a narrow way in the rugged mountains towards the valley where the Hawazin and other tribes were waiting. It was very clear and it was an early morning, not yet light. The Muslims were unaware that under cover of darkness the Hawazin warriors had already climbed up the mountain and were waiting for them. As soon as all the Muslims were trapped in the narrow passageway below, the Hawazin ambushed them. First they threw rocks down upon them and then attacked with arrows and swords. In surprise and fear, the Muslims started to retreat. The Prophet, peace be upon him, was bitterly disappointed to see them fleeing in terror, but he stayed firmly in place with Abu Bakr. Ali, his uncle Al-Abbas, and a few companions at his side. Al-Abbas then called to the Muslims to return and not to abandon the Prophet, peace be upon him. Ashamed at what they had done and seeing the Prophet, peace be upon him, facing the enemy almost alone, the Muslims quickly returned to fight. Then Allah sent his angels, the hosts you cannot see, to their aid. A fierce battle followed. The Muslim warriors advanced, attacking furiously, driving the Hawazin back from the path into the valley where the fighting went on long and hard. At the end of the day, the Muslims won, but not before having learned a hard lesson about the danger of pride. Just as the old man had predicted, the defeated enemy fled, leaving their families and possessions to be captured. Later, all the leaders of the tribes except one came to ask for them back and to declare their acceptance of Islam. The Prophet, peace be upon him, forgave them and returned their families to them, but not their belongings. The one exception was the leader of Hawazin. He fled to Taif, where he sought protection in the castle, but the Muslims pursued him and surrounded the city, which they besieged for about 3 weeks. They tried to break into the castle, but after losing many men in the attempt, the Prophet, peace be upon him, ordered a withdrawal. The story did not end there, however, for shortly afterwards the Hawazin and most of other tribes came to Mecca and declared themselves Muslim, including Malik, who had led them into battle and whom the Prophet, peace be upon him, now made their leader. After the battle of the Hunayn valley, the Prophet, peace be upon him, distributed what goods had been taken between the people of Quraysh and the other Bedouin tribes. The Ansar from Medina, who had been his only support during the long, hard years before the conquest of Mecca, received nothing. They felt angry about this and went to the Prophet, peace be upon him, to complain. He said to them, "What is this I hear of you? Do you think badly of me? Did I not come to you when you did not know the truth, and Allah guided you? When you were poor, and Allah made you rich? When you were enemies, and Allah softened your hearts? Are you covetous for the things of this world that I must use to gain people's trust so that I can then lead them to Islam? Surely for you Islam is enough. Are you not satisfied that while some men take away flocks and herds, you take Allah's messenger back with you to Medina?" On hearing this, all the men felt very contrite and began to weep. Then with great humility and reverence their spokesman said, "We are indeed well pleased to have Allah's messenger as our gift in this life." Perhaps we could ask ourselves the same question. Are we not blessed to have Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and the book guiding us in what really matters forever and ever? Is this not so much more important than thinking about the momentary pleasures of the day? Shortly after this, the Ansar left for Medina, accompanied by the Prophet, peace be upon him. He could have stayed among his own people and lived out his days in Mecca, but he returned as he had promised to live among the people of Medina, which was a great blessing for them. Allah gave you victory on many fields, and on the day of Hunayn, when you exulted in your great numbers, it was of no help to you, and the earth, vast as it was, straightened for you. Then you turned back in flight. Then Allah sent his peace of reassurance down upon his messenger and upon the believers, and sent down hosts you could not see, and punished those who did not believe. Such is the reward of disbelievers. Then afterwards Allah will relent towards whom He will, for Allah is forgiving and merciful. Tabuk, the test of faith. News of the growing power of the Muslims, as more and more of Arabia followed the Prophet, peace be upon him, eventually reached Heraclius, emperor of the Eastern Roman Empire. The Romans saw the uniting of the Arabs in Islam as a possible threat to their empire, and the emperor's advisors and generals therefore decided that the best thing to do would be to attack the Muslims from the north and east at the same time and destroy Islam once and for all. 2 years had passed since Heraclius had told them of the Prophet's letter asking them to submit to Islam, but just as then they were in no mood now to listen to such ideas. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, heard of the Romans' plan, he decided that it would be better to meet the Roman army in Tabuk, some 500 kilometers from Medina on the route to Syria, then to await an attack on Medina. One reason for this decision was that the Prophet, peace be upon him, felt that if the Muslims were defeated at Medina, the city as well as the army would be taken, which would mean the end of Islam. This was a very hard decision for him to make, because not only was Tabuk a very long way away, but it was also harvest time and a particularly hot year. Added to this was the fact that the enemy had an enormous army. Now at this time there were some people living in Medina who were not true believers. They were called hypocrites because they pretended to believe but hid what was truly in their hearts. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, everyone to war, these hypocrites tried to create fear and doubt among the Muslims, saying, "How can we hope to defeat the Romans, whose great empire stretches over vast areas of the world? And even if we could, we will not get the chance, because the long journey and the heat will defeat us first. In any case, our crops and fruits are ready to be harvested. How can we leave them? We will be ruined if we do." All that the hypocrites said severely tested the Muslims, who would continue to fight for his religion against such odds. Who would have the courage to give his wealth to help equip an army? This test of faith would indeed show who the true Muslims were. On this question, Allah revealed the following verse: "O you who believe, what aileth you, that when it is said unto you, Go forth in the way of Allah, you are bowed down to the ground with heaviness? Do you take pleasure in the life of the world rather than in the hereafter? The comfort of the life of the world is but little in the hereafter." To form and equip an army, the Prophet, peace be upon him, needed a great deal of money, and despite all that the hypocrites had said, many Muslims, especially the Prophet's close friends, were willing to help. Usman, for instance, generously provided horses and arms for 10,000 soldiers, and Abu Bakr gave all that he had in the world. Umar too gave a great deal, and in this way the Prophet, peace be upon him, was able to equip an army of 40,000 soldiers. Finally, everything was ready, but just as they were about to leave, 7 more men came to the Prophet, peace be upon him, to ask if they could go with him. Unfortunately, he had to refuse because there were no animals for them to ride on. The 7 men were so upset that they wept as they left, with nothing more to be done. The army moved off, but just then several spare camels were found. On learning of this, the Prophet, peace be upon him, sent for the 7 men, who were overjoyed to find that they could join him in his fight. By now the Romans had heard that the Muslims were coming out to meet them. They felt even more sure of victory when they heard this, because they believed that it would be quite impossible for an army to cross a waterless desert in the scorching summer sun. Even if by some miracle the Muslims succeeded, they would be so exhausted that it would be easy to defeat them. As it happened, the heat was so intense and the journey so difficult that several Muslims did turn back. The Prophet, peace be upon him, and most of the others, however, continued until they finally ran out of water. The expedition now seemed hopeless as the men grew thirsty and thirstier. The Prophet, peace be upon him, prayed to Allah for help, and as he finished his prayer, the first drops of rain came splashing down. The rain continued to fall until all the Muslims had drunk their fill. That night they slept soundly for the first time in days, refreshed by the water and confident that Bilal would wake them as usual for the dawn prayer. But Bilal slept so deeply that he did not wake up. It was the first time that the Muslims had missed a prayer, and they were very upset. The Prophet, peace be upon him, however, was not angry with Bilal and told the Muslims that they need not be upset because they had not intentionally missed the prayer. The Prophet, peace be upon him, and his army continued their trek across the desert and finally arrived at the oasis of Tabuk. When they got there, however, they were surprised to find that the Roman army had retreated in fear on hearing of the miraculous crossing of the desert by the Muslims. The Prophet, peace be upon him, waited at the oasis for a while, but when it became apparent that the Romans were not going to fight, he gave the order to return home. The enemy was not pursued because the Prophet, peace be upon him, only fought when attacked. The long march to Tabuk had been yet another test of faith for the Muslims. Even so, there were still some among those who made the heroic journey who were hypocrites, pretending to be sincere while being enemies of Islam in their hearts. No one could have suspected that anyone who had made that journey across the desert with the Prophet, peace be upon him, would be an enemy of his. Realizing this, several hypocrites plotted to kill the Prophet, peace be upon him, by pushing him off the top of a high rocky passage that ran between the mountains of Aqaba. Before the army reached this rocky passage, however, Allah warned the Prophet, peace be upon him, about this wicked plan. The Prophet, peace be upon him, therefore ordered the entire army to travel through the valley while he and his 2 guards went by the way of the cliff. As the plotters approached, he shouted to them so that they could see that he knew of their plan. Whereupon they quickly ran back to the army and tried to hide among the rest of the soldiers. Later, the Prophet, peace be upon him, gathered his followers around him and told them what had happened. He picked out the men who had plotted against him and even told them the exact words they had spoken to each other. Some of the Prophet's companions said that these men should be killed, but the Prophet, peace be upon him, forgave them. As soon as he arrived back in Medina, the Prophet, peace be upon him, went to the mosque and prayed. Many of the hypocrites who had not gone with him to Tabuk came to give their reasons for not having done so. 3 men of spiritual value who had not joined the army were subjected to the Prophet, peace be upon him, to the discipline of waiting for Allah's forgiveness. For 50 days, no one spoke to them. Finally, Allah revealed a verse to the Prophet, peace be upon him, which declared that these 3 men were forgiven. Allah hath turned in mercy to the Prophet and to the Muhajirin and the Ansar who followed him in the hour of hardship, after the hearts of a party of them had almost swerved aside. Then he turned unto them in mercy. Lo, he is full of pity, merciful. And to the 3 also did he turn in mercy who were left behind when the earth, vast as it is, was straitened for them, and their own souls were straitened for them, till they understood that there is no refuge from Allah save toward him. Then he turned unto them in mercy, that they too might turn repentant unto him. Lo Allah, he is the relenting, the merciful. O you who believe, be careful of your duty to Allah and be with truthful. The farewell pilgrimage. The Prophet, peace be upon him, had become the most powerful leader in the whole of Arabia. After the idols in the Kaaba had been smashed and Quraysh had become Muslim, most of the other tribes of Arabia came to declare their Islam. The year in which they came was later to be called the Year of Deputations. As each tribe joined Islam, the Prophet, peace be upon him, sent his men to teach them about their new religion. Many people also came to Medina to question the Prophet, peace be upon him, himself. One tribe sent a man called Dimam, who was large and strong. On arriving in Medina, he went straight to the mosque, where the Messenger of Allah, peace be upon him, was sitting with some of his companions, and stood over the Prophet. In a loud, rough voice, he asked, "Which of you is the son of Abd al-Muttalib?" When the Prophet, peace be upon him, answered him, the Imam went on, "I am going to ask you a hard question, so do not misunderstand me. I ask you to swear by Allah, your Allah, the Allah of those before you, and the Allah of those who will come after you. He sent you to us as a messenger." "Yes, he has," replied the Prophet, peace be upon him. "Has Allah instructed you to order us to serve him, to pray these 5 prayers, to pay alms, to fast, to make the pilgrimage, and to follow the other laws of Islam?" Continued the Imam. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, answered that Allah had indeed instructed him in this way, the Imam became a Muslim, and as he left added, "Then I will do the things we are told to do, and avoid the things we are forbidden, no more and no less." As the Imam mounted his camel to leave, the Prophet, peace be upon him, told the people around him, "If this man is sincere, he will go to paradise." When the Imam reached his people, they all thought he had gone mad, but by nightfall, after he had finished speaking, there were not among them that had accepted Islam. When the time came for the yearly pilgrimage, it was proclaimed that the Prophet, peace be upon him, would be going to Mecca. The Muslims flocked to Medina from all over Arabia to join him on his journey to the Kaaba. As the tribes arrived, they camped around the city until they finally numbered more than 30,000. The Prophet, peace be upon him, went out with his family and friends to pilgrimage, but before setting off, he led all the Muslims in prayer. After the prayers, the Prophet, peace be upon him, got on his camel and headed towards Mecca, followed by the pilgrims, all of whom, for the first time in centuries, worshipped Allah, the one God. The Prophet, peace be upon him, and his companions were deeply moved by the sight of the huge number of Muslims accompanying them to Mecca, carrying no arms and fearing no one. They could not help but remember their original flight from Mecca, when they had been so few in number and were forced to leave in order to avoid the anger of Quraysh. Throughout the journey, the Muslims repeated a prayer taught to them by the Prophet, peace be upon him, which he in turn had received from the angel Jibreel alayhi wasalam. This prayer, the Talbiyah, has been part of the Hajj ritual ever since. It is in answer to the call Abraham was commanded to make when he and Ismail finished building the Kaaba. Labbaik, Allahumma labbaik, labbaik la sharika laka, labbaik. Innal hamda wal ni'mata laka wal mulk, la sharika laka. Here I am, O Allah, at thy service. Here I am, thou art without partner. Here I am, all praise and blessings are thine, and dominion. Thou art without partner. After 10 days, the pilgrims marched at sunset through the same pass by which they had entered on the day of conquest of Mecca. When they reached the Kaaba, the Prophet, peace be upon him, stood before it in prayer. Then he and all the Muslims walked around it 7 times, saying their prayer aloud. Next, just as Abraham had done, they went towards the Mount of Mercy at Arafah, which the Prophet, peace be upon him, ascended on a camel. From the mountain he led the people in prayer, and then spoke to them as they stood assembled on the vast plain below. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, said to is known as the farewell sermon, because it was the last speech the Prophet, peace be upon him, made before he passed away. He said, surely you will meet your Lord, and he will question you about your works. He asked the Muslims to take their guidance from the Quran and from his own example. This, he said, was the best way to live. He ordered them to stop living in the way they had before Islam. Revenge, one of the oldest traditions in Arabia, was ended forever. Usury was prohibited. Property was to be respected. Things which previously were forbidden during the 4 sacred months of the year were now forbidden at all times. He then commanded, know that every Muslim is a Muslim's brother, which was a completely new idea to the tribes who had so often quarrelled in the past. He also said that given everyone his due exactly what each one deserves. After each point, the Prophet, peace be upon him, asked, have I explained it well? Is it perfectly clear? Everyone answered, yes. For these were the people who would have to pass on the Prophet's message and instructions to those who were unable to be present that day and to future generations. The Prophet, peace be upon him, said, I have left you 2 things. If you hold on to them, you will be saved. They are Allah's book and the words of your Prophet. He then asked, have I not conveyed the message? The multitude shouted out, by Allah, yes. The Prophet, peace be upon him, ended, O Allah, bear witness to that. This day, those who disbelieve are in despair of ever harming your religion, so do not fear them, but fear me. This day I have perfected your religion for you, and I have completed my favour unto you, and have chosen for you as a religion al-Islam. Many Muslims started to shed tears, knowing that if the Prophet, peace be upon him, had completed his message, his life must be near its end. After spending the rest of the day of Arafah in prayer and contemplation, the Muslims began to complete the pilgrimage by returning to Mecca with the Talbiyah prayer still on their lips. The first night of the return journey was spent at Muzdalifah. Here they gathered pebbles which they carried with them the next day to Mina. There they stood before a huge rock and stoned it in remembrance of Abraham's meeting with the devil in that very place. When Abraham received the order from Allah to sacrifice his son Ismail as a test of his faith, the devil had tried to convince him not to do it. He came to Abraham at Mina as he was on his way to carry out Allah's command, but Abraham took some stones and hurled them at the devil to drive him away, since the casting of stones at Mina on the Prophet's farewell pilgrimage, this has become another ritual which Muslims perform on their annual pilgrimage to remind them that they too must continue to drive the devil away when he tries to prevent them from being obedient to Allah. After throwing the stones, the pilgrims sacrificed sheep and camels and gave the meat to the poor. In this way, the great faith of Abraham was remembered, for when he had been ready to sacrifice Ismail, Allah had sent a sheep in his place. The Muslims then completed the pilgrimage by again circling the Kaaba 7 times. They then cut their hair and nails and changed out of their white clothes to show they had returned to their daily lives. Before returning to Medina, the Muslims spent 3 nights in the valley of Medina, where the final preparations were made for the journey home. As for the Prophet, peace be upon him, he made one final visit before leaving Mecca. This was to the grave of his devoted wife Khadija, who had been the first person to believe in Allah's revelation through him. The Prophet, peace be upon him, knew that this would be the last time he would see the grave or Mecca, because during the pilgrimage he had received the chapter of the Quran called Help, from which he knew that his death was not far away. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. When Allah's help and triumph comes, and thou sees mankind entering the religion of Allah in troops, then him the praises of thy Lord, and seek forgiveness of him. Lo, he is ever ready to show mercy. The Prophet's death. One night, shortly after his return to Medina, the Prophet, peace be upon him, woke up at midnight and asked his servant Abdullah to saddle his mule. They then left the house and went to the Baqi al-Gharqad, the burial ground of the Muslims. There, the Prophet, peace be upon him, stood in front of the graves and, as though he could see the Muslims buried in them, spoke to them and prayed over them. Later, Abdullah reported, the Prophet, peace be upon him, told me that he was ordered to pray for the dead and that I was to go with him. After the Prophet, peace be upon him, had prayed, he turned to Abdullah and said, I can choose between all the riches of this world, a long life and then paradise, or meeting my Lord and entering paradise now. Abdullah begged him to choose a long rich life followed by paradise, but the Prophet, peace be upon him, told him that he had already chosen to meet his Lord now rather than remain in the world. The following morning the Prophet, peace be upon him, awoke with a terrible headache, but despite this he had led the prayers at the mosque. From what he said afterwards to the people assembled there, they understood that his death was near. The Prophet, peace be upon him, praised his best friend Abu Bakr, who had begun to weep, and told everyone that he knew they would all meet again at a pool in paradise. He added, however, that although he was sure they would always worship Allah alone, he feared that the pleasures of the world would attract them and they would begin to compete with one another for material possessions. forgetting spiritual things. Soon after, the Prophet, peace be upon him, requested that he be moved to the room of Aisha, one of his wives. As the days passed, his fever grew worse, until one day he was so ill that he could not even get to the mosque, which was next to where Aisha lived. The Prophet, peace be upon him, told Aisha to tell the Muslims to let Abu Bakr, her father, lead the prayer, which made them very sad, for this was the first time anyone had taken the Prophet's place. Later, on the 12th day of Rabi al-Awwal in the 11th year of Islam, June 8th, 632 AD, the Prophet, peace be upon him, heard the voices of the people in prayer. With great effort, he got up and looked from his door at all the Muslims who were assembled in rows behind Abu Bakr. He smiled with great satisfaction. Abu Bakr saw him and stepped back to give the Prophet, peace be upon him, his place. The Muslims were happy, thinking he was going to pray with them as before. But the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, who looked radiantly beautiful that day, signaled to them to continue on their own. He prayed in a sitting position at the right of Abu Bakr, after which he went back inside and lay his head on Aisha's lap. He was in such pain that his daughter Fatima cried out in pity. Then the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "There is no pain for your father after this day. Truly, death has appeared to me. We must all suffer it till the day of judgment." As he lay there, Aisha remembered that he had once said, "Allah never takes a prophet to himself without giving him the choice." Then she heard the Prophet, peace be upon him, speak. His last words were, "Nay, rather the exalted communion of paradise." Aisha then said to herself, "So by Allah, he is not choosing us." When the people in the mosque heard that the Prophet, peace be upon him, was dead, they were filled with grief. Umar could not and would not believe it and exclaimed that it was not true. Abu Bakr then went out and spoke gently to the people, saying, "All praise belongs to Allah. O people, whoever worshipped Muhammad, Muhammad is dead. But for him who worships Allah, Allah is living and never dies." He then recited this verse from the Quran, which had been revealed after the battle of Uhud. In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, Muhammad is but a messenger. Messengers, the like of whom have passed away before him. Will it be that when he dies or is slain, you will turn back on your heels? He who turns back does not hurt to Allah, and Allah will reward the thankful. No soul can ever die except by Allah's permission and at a term appointed. Whoso desires the reward of the world, we bestow on him thereof, and whosoever desires the reward of the hereafter, we bestow on him thereof. We shall reward the thankful. After this, the people pledged their loyalty to Abu Bakr, whom the Prophet, peace be upon him, had chosen to lead the prayer. Abu Bakr accepted and concluded what he had to say with these words, "Obey me so long as I obey Allah and His Messenger. But if I disobey Allah and His Messenger, you owe me no obedience. Arise for your prayer. Allah have mercy upon you." The people rose and asked him, "Where will the Prophet be buried?" Abu Bakr remembered that the Prophet, peace be upon him, had said, "No prophet dies who is not buried on the spot where he died." And so the Prophet, peace be upon him, was buried in a grave dug in the floor of Aisha's room in the house next to the mosque. The spot became known as the Haram al-Nabawi, and Muslims from all over the world go there to pray and to give their blessings and greetings of peace and the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And lo, thine verily will be a reward unfailing, and lo, thou art of a tremendous nature.